Welcome back to episode 134 of Tall Boy Radio. Now, if you're watching this on the video, you'll see there isn't the usual array of faces. There is my good self, and I'll be drinking several beers that have been kindly donated to me. And I'll talk about those in a second. But I'll introduce our other host. Our host for this evening is Dave. How are you doing, dude?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Not bad at all. I got a couple of beers here. We're down in Southwold at the Adams Brewery. So I've got a New England IPA and something called a Mosaic Pale Ale.
Nice. Do quite like those Mosaic hops. Well, I also am drinking an Adams beer in my first beer, which is the Earl Grey Lager. Now, I am not a fan of tea, I have to say. I am a fan of lager. Surprise, surprise. This isn't too bad, dude. I'm not going to lie. The tea isn't too overpowering, but it gives it just a nice little bitterness to the lager. And the other beers that I've got on one side, all donated by your good self, I should add. Peach. Not a big fan of peach, but I will be having that one next. The Peach Vegan Milkshake IPA. Quite looking forward to that one. And then we move on to...
I can see why I donated that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind a peach beer. I've had a peach sour before and I loved it. And I've got a chocolate brownie milk stout before maybe moving on to a coffee stout if there's time. Let's face it, I'm going to have a go.
Cans are small.
They are good. They are. And I'm thirsty, and I've been drinking Prosecco all day. Now, Prosecco is alcohol-free Prosecco.
Oh dear.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm in need of some libations. So today, we said we wanted to do something different. Talk about, like, a little bit like we did last week. Bit of an old-school Tall Boy Radio episode where we spoke about football, just the hosts chatting away. So we're going to do something similar this week. Now, we've talked about conspiracy theories before. But Dave, I would suspect... you aren't someone who panders to that kind of stuff too easily.
No, I take some convincing. I mean, by the kind of name of them is kind of prejudiced to almost suggest that they're not real in the first place. But over time, I think there's some conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true.
Well, this is true. This is true. There are a number that have been true. Now, it's interesting you say that. Do you think then that the phrase conspiracy theory is put there by naysayers, not by people who actually believe it, but literally almost an expression that people will then use to dismiss what is actually being said without it even being heard? Because if you describe something as a conspiracy theory, already you're thinking nut jobs, tin hats, or tinfoil hats, I should say. You can't take it too seriously. So is the phrase there to be dismissive, do you think?
The root of the phrase, I don't know, but you can certainly imagine it. Being used that way. As soon as anybody wants to shut anything down, just label it a conspiracy theory, and all of a sudden people think they're bonkers.
Exactly. Now, I've got 7 conspiracy theories for us tonight to look at. Some we might go into depth about, some we might disagree about, some we may agree about. Who knows? Only one of them, I would say, is one of those sort of very commonplace old schools, maybe 2. So should we start off with the first one then, dude?
Yeah, go for it.
Be interested to know what you know about this then. The Great Reset. This is a conspiracy theory that is being bandied about at this moment in time. Do you know much about the Great Reset?
No. I mean, I might if you explain it, but the phrase itself doesn't ring any bells.
Well, the Great Reset was something that was put about by the World Economic Forum, which is basically a group of very, very wealthy individuals who are looking at the way, after obviously the banking crisis, which occurred a few years ago, didn't go so well, banks had to be bailed out. People were looking really at the way that finance was structured, the way the world was structured, and just the way that things were going in general, and decided that maybe what we needed to do was have a great reset, literally get to the point where what we're doing now clearly is not working out, so we need to reset it. So in principle, you would say probably, it doesn't sound like it's too bad of a thing. But then the World Economic Forum used an expression. They put together a very wishy-washy video, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But this is the tagline they used. Let's see if this one sucks you in, dude. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Are you on board with this?
It sounds a bit communist in its thinking. There's something serious that they put out, or is that the whole point? I mean, you said there was a video they put out, so they put something out.
Yeah, there is. There's a fair bit you can watch online now. A number of people sort of think that this is literally looking at the way that we structure our lives, the way that the economy is structured. It does need resetting to prevent things like the banking crisis happen. However, there is a little bit of a conspiracy theory, and it centers largely around COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 and that pandemic, when that happened, obviously the world changed a little bit in the way that we all dealt with things. It was a new experience for everybody, unless obviously you count the plague of 1666 or whatever it was, I forget. You know, when obviously there was a little bit of isolation going on there. So in that time frame, everybody then had to stay in the houses, they had to stay at home, and things changed a little bit. I don't know if it changed for yourself. You probably worked from home more than you did before. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I worked from home mostly, but it was entirely work from home for the best part of 2 years, apart from that little time when everything opened and everyone thought, yeah, it's all okay again. Oh, no, it isn't.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with my wife. My wife literally would drive into the office, do her job, and come home. And all of a sudden, they sent out all this IT equipment, which is set just to the left of me here. And she started working from home. And this is what people have started saying, that this level of change in shift change is the Great Reset. It's been pushed through. And actually, the way that we dealt with the pandemic wasn't anything to do with dealing with COVID-19. It was forcing through change for the sake of getting the Great Reset started off. So the working from home, and then we're sort of seeing in America now that there's an enormous amount of real estate that normally would have been bought up by just homeowners, and these houses and these homes are being bought by central and financial bodies and then rented back out, which, like you say, is akin to communism, really. And all this is changing with the shopping, the way that we shop now. When we shopped online very heavily before, I know I did anyway, but I think since then, the idea of going to the shops, the fact that I spend most of my day in the shop as well, means that shopping doesn't really appeal to me. So that we then purchase stuff online. And something else that happened during the pandemic was there was a transfer of wealth. So people started to feel the pinch a little bit when they couldn't work. There were handouts that were given to the people by the government, and that was seen as a way of control by the fact that you owed this money to us. We're giving you the money for you to spend. And then there was a group of people, the likes of Jeff Bezos, who got incredibly wealthy. And it's something that I think we do in the Western world. We celebrate someone who's amassed a large amount of wealth. But what you have to think about is where that money has actually come from. For them to get incredibly wealthy, it needs to come from somebody else. So that transfer, which is why it's called a transfer of wealth. So the conspiracy theory about this then isn't so much the Great Reset, which may or may not be required. I don't know. It might not be something that ever happens. It might just be a theory. But the conspiracy theory is that the pandemic, the way it was managed by governments, being managed by these large financial bodies, you know, the big pharma, the big electronic companies, all those sort of folks, managing them in a way that is more beneficial to them. What's your take on that?
I'm trying to get my head around the big reset bit first, and what that goal would be. Literally everybody's wealth is wiped away, and we all start from zero, and you can still have people that, inverted commas, climb to the top, or is it distributed evenly, or is it just taking it away from the ultra rich people and organizations so that there's more chance of more companies starting up new and building?
It doesn't seem to be based around small businesses. Small businesses seem to be falling by the wayside. And if you're to believe that, obviously, the pandemic, when it affected, tended to affect smaller businesses, didn't it? And it was very difficult for some of those to survive without their smaller customer base. Whereas the large places like Amazon, who have a huge customer base that is worldwide, benefited. So the trouble with the Great Reset is you can go on, if you head onto their website, have a look at it, and watch the videos. I've watched it. and there's another one which is about 40 minutes long. It makes no sense to me. I couldn't figure out what the benefits were. I couldn't figure out the reasons for doing it, other than obviously, we would like to avoid, the financial crash like we did. It wasn't beneficial. But then obviously now we got seeing things like the hiked up prices in gas, which people are very suspicious about. We're seeing the likes of inflation, which people are very suspicious about. And just in general, the way that finances are being managed, it's all very questionable. Everything sort of does appear to have changed in the last couple of years. Now, are they related? Probably, possibly. Are they done intentionally? Well, that's another matter.
So it's not a reset as in shake everything down, start from the beginning. It's a reset as in a systematic change of the world economy, essentially.
Yeah, it is. And not only that, it would be a totally different way of doing things, because a recognition of what we're doing right now isn't really working for us. But the conspiracy theory comes around in terms of the way that we then dealt with the pandemic was to force these changes through. The coercion and getting people just to listen to what governments say. That literally they say you stay in your house, and all of a sudden everybody listened. And I don't know about you, but I was actually quite surprised that there was less. I expected more people to kick back a little bit against these measures than I actually did. But for the most part, everybody listened. There was that recognition that it was beneficial for our health. We had to do it. We had to protect the vulnerable. And I still expected there to be a little bit more, well, people not listening quite as much. As it went on, we saw that, the mask wearing deteriorated. People were less concerned by social distancing and started to believe that this wasn't necessarily what we were sold it to be. Now, I'm not saying whether it is or whether it isn't, but what I am saying is maybe this pandemic, the way it was managed, was it done so that we could change the way that we work? And in terms of real estate now, in terms of office space, there must be an awful lot of office space. I certainly know, of companies that are downsizing in their office space, losing real estate based around the way that we work now. And listen, let's be honest, this isn't one I buy into, but there is a lot of chatter about it at the moment. I just wonder if there's anything that you were aware of or had an opinion about.
I've not heard of it at all. I'm still not quite clear what the reset part of it is, but beyond that, was everything manipulated for an end goal? Well, my initial thought was, if it was, then was COVID itself part of that plan? Otherwise, a lot of Illuminati type people got together very quickly and came up with a massive plan around the world, or certainly the major economies around the world came up with a plan cohesively of how they were going to communicate to all of all the people in their relevant countries to work together to a common goal. That seems very unlikely, even if such Illuminati type organization exists, even if governments talk to each other in a way that the public never see to control and manipulate things deliberately underhand. It just seems very unlikely that would happen very quickly once the COVID was found. As for working from home, I think it was quite, fear was the big one, I think, unknown. And I think there's fear of the unknown as opposed to just the unknown, if that makes sense. The fear, it wasn't that we didn't know, we were fearing what we didn't know, and it could have been really bad. And, we all have different opinions about whether COVID was really bad and we were right to hide away and protect ourselves, or whether actually it was just a flu and loads of people have died anyway, and in the long term it made no difference. But it was pretty bad, and a lot of people died that probably wouldn't have died of flu. Our office, we just always followed whatever the government guidelines said, which is kind of the point you're making. But what choice do you have? If you don't, as an organisation, you get yourself in an awful lot of trouble quite quickly, especially if you force people into an office and somebody gets ill and dies, you're in a whole lot of trouble. So we followed all the rules, sent everyone home, put up plastic screens, minimum staff in the office, kicked people out, and followed the rules all the way through until we were allowed to let people back in the office again. Did that result in profits for Amazon and big organizations? Yeah, because we ordered a load of stuff for people to work from home. Our company itself saw massive spikes in spend in places like Argos, Currys, all the tech places, the gift cards that we sell. Massive spikes in spend as everyone went home to buy desks and computers and printers. So it fueled the rich, which again is another point you made. So you could see why people might look into it, but I think that's all driven by perhaps people thinking that rich people at the top just get richer, to the detriment of everybody else, and that quite often underpins conspiracy theories.
It's an interesting point, that, dude. It is an interesting point, especially when you bear in mind we have a Conservative government which will benefit capitalism, should we say, which does encourage those who are quite wealthy to be able to make more money. I'm not saying it necessarily discourages other people. Their opportunities are there, but they're fewer and further between based on the level of money you have in your bank account, as a rule. Not that I'm a fan of the Conservative government. Let me put that one out there just in case you were wondering. And so you're quite right there. That is generally how conspiracy theories do come about, isn't it? You can sort of see the logic as to why it could happen naturally, but then again, you can sort of see why people would believe that it wouldn't. And I was watching something on YouTube as well, and it was literally, why do people believe in conspiracy theories? And the theory was that things like this just simply are beyond our control. They're beyond my control, they're beyond your control, they're beyond the control of the everyday man. And by having a conspiracy theory and feeling you have the control of the knowledge, that I know what they're up to, that's where you taking back a little bit of power. You're recognizing this is what these guys are up to. This is why I shouldn't trust them. This is why I shouldn't believe them, because look, I've seen the evidence which matches up with everything I believe. Yes, it might match up with everything they're saying as well, but by this way, I'm taking back a little bit of power. Would you believe in that?
I guess there's some argument in that. People generally don't like the unknown. That's why we have religions and gods and things like that, because people have the unknown, so they make something up and believe in it, and call it faith. And great, faith is a great thing. So you can see why having to have an answer for something, even if it's ludicrous in the face of facts in front of you, because it doesn't matter at that point. You just want to believe something, and if the person next to you agrees with you, and the person next to them agrees with you, and all of a sudden you've got an echo chamber, and the echo chamber grows, and the conspiracy theory becomes credible because everyone you're talking to believes you. Now, the fact that everyone you're talking to is listening to the same thing and believing it is kind of beside the point. It creates that echo chamber, and once everybody you know is believing it, or a large number of people you know believe it, it just becomes reality. And you can imagine people having that cemented into their head that it's real, and it is happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is the thing, I forget the expression, is like belief is truth. If you believe something, it becomes the truth, irrespective of whether it's accurate or not. So, like you say, a lot of people will see this information, will share this information. But like we said earlier, there are conspiracy theories that have been out there that have been proved to be true. But I'm going to move on to the second one. Let's find out if this one's going to be, that was a little bit downbeat. Let's do something a bit cheery now. So let's go with Bill Gates isn't a philanthropist. He's a very naughty boy. So there are conspiracy theories surrounding the philanthropist Bill Gates. Obviously, people have a number of opinions on him. Again, not straying too far away from what we were just talking about. He was obviously quite heavily linked with everything that's gone on in the last 2 years. And obviously, there's a number of negatives about that, and people believe a various amount of things about that. And also, there's some other stuff that old Bill's been up to that people find a little bit questionable. First of all, he's an incredibly wealthy man and does donate an awful lot of money to charity from his Bill and is it Bill and Melinda Gates?
Melinda Gates, yeah.
Foundation, yeah. But again, so there's various laws about what pesticides and things that farmers can use, and obviously they're saying now, and you've seen the uprisings in the likes of the Netherlands, where they're challenging and fighting back against what they can and can't use, because they're saying it is stopping them from growing their crops. Now, at the same time that this is going on, where farmland is under pressure because of what the crops that they can now produce, Mr. Gates has become the biggest buyer of farmland in the United States, where he's buying up the farmland from these farmers at a cheaper rate because the value has been, well, it's all been devalued. So that's one thing about old Billy Boy. Second one is the old vaccines themselves. He was he was definitely a proponent of them, and has been a proponent of vaccines in general. And his foundation is rumored to have funded experimental malaria and meningitis vaccine trials in Africa, which have put an awful lot of people at risk and also cost a lot of lives, where it literally wiped out large amounts of the population where they've tested these vaccinations on people, and it has not been beneficial to them. This isn't me saying this. This is the internet. I am not saying anything else. So, Bill, and then let's just factor in old Mr. Epstein as well, where he was meeting up on his paedophile island to talk about philanthropy. So, Bill Gates, is he a Bond villain?
Bill Gates, crikey! I think similar to the last one, very rich person, and being very rich immediately makes you a target to lots of people, because people don't, it's just instinct for some people. If you're very rich, you're naturally a bad person, and you can't accumulate that amount of wealth with those sizes and numbers of businesses, with that number of employees, without having problems, without having cause for people to complain. It's just impossible. Even a small organization will have problems. So if you imagine the size of the organizations he's responsible for, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be things going wrong. And if people focus and look at those and then start to weave that into other stories that may or may not have any foundation, not like the Bill and Gates one.
Nice play on words.
Then you can imagine why, again, people would think there's conspiracies. I mean, the vaccination ones was it nano microchips or something was in the vaccination so he could control everyone. It's clearly nonsense.
No.
Buying up farmland. I mean, I would imagine if he is, it's a matter of fact. But what's his reason for doing it? Has anybody ever asked him? Is he buying it up purely to stop harmful pesticides being used on land that are damaging the environment? So he thinks, wow, there's two options here. All the farmers can have these massive farms. In America, the size of the farms are just absolutely huge, and keep pumping in all the damaging fertilizers and chemicals to maximize profits. Or do I just buy the land and just don't do that? That's a good thing.
It is. I think if you were the farmer, though, who felt that they were losing their livelihood because they can no longer afford to farm the land themselves, they probably would have more of a negative feel on that. Now, why he's actually buying the land, truthfully, I don't know, and perhaps that's information that's been shared out there. Certainly, I've never come across it. But going back to the vaccinations, like you said, there was that was a conspiracy theory. Old Billy Boy was sticking in a microchip inside you, to control you. You just think, really, because, I've got Microsoft technology here in my smartphone that I willingly carry around with me. He's not had to force me to do it. I know it listens to me. I know it tracks every single piece of data that I have on there. God help us all. And in many ways it does control us, because the advertising then is personalized to my preferences. So, in terms of that, there was really no need. There was really no need to try and implant a chip in anybody. I think that one in itself sounds a little bit far-fetched anyway, didn't it? I never felt that was something that many people really believed in. I felt that there were a number of people out there, and again, this is when we look at the phrases that people use. So when we talked about conspiracy theory can be seen to have negative connotations. Well, this was another one, to make you go and get your vaccinations. If you didn't, do you know what you were? You were an anti-vaxxer. You were against vaccines. Now, that might not be true. Certainly, I'll be honest, I've not had any of the vaccinations. Am I against vaccination? No, I'm not. My kids have had all their vaccinations. I've had every other vaccination before this one. I just didn't feel the need to get this one. I didn't feel that I was at risk. And anecdotally, from what I was seeing no benefits from having it. People were still getting it. They were still passing it on. You could say that when people have had it afterwards, they've had, milder cases of it. I don't know. But I don't have any of the traits that would have put me, theoretically, I'm not you would want to say this because as far as I know, I ain't had it yet, that would have put me at risk from having it. And that was my decision not to have it. And obviously, again, it does have test status until, is it 2023? So I was a little bit uncomfortable around the idea of getting it anyway. But as an anti-vaxxer, no, I'm not. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. But I'll be labelled as that because it's derogatory. It diminishes my opinion. And I just wonder if this chip, the idea of having a chip in there is so nonsensical and such a silly idea that it's one that's put about to think, if you're not getting your vaccination, you're an idiot who thinks they're going to have a microchip stuck in their arm.
It just fuels that that label of conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, it does.
And bans you and like Djokovic, I felt got a very rough time because he never said he was anti-vaccines. He just said it's my choice what I put in my body. Yeah. I'm a top athlete. I don't want to do that. I don't know what the side effects are going to be. I'll take my chances with getting COVID. Thank you very much. And he got a huge amount of stick. Now, I don't disagree with him being deported from Australia because they had rules. Very simple.
I'd agree with that.
You know, but equally, they probably messed up a bit politically. Had they been a bit clearer and not accepted him and then denied him, it probably wouldn't have been so bad. But he got a lot of bad press and was labelled anti-vaxxer purely through expressing his choice of not having it. So things like the Bill Gates microchip just does fuel the, you know, you're all anti-vaxxers, you're all conspiracy theorists, you're all stupid, that kind of line.
It does, and this is trouble. This is the troubling thing nowadays, isn't it? When the internet is as prevalent as it is, and I had a lad who worked for me. He described the internet as the worst idea that has ever been had. And you know, and in some ways, I can get where he's coming from. But at the same time, it's also the best idea that anybody's ever come up with in terms of the way you can share information now. But the danger is by doing that, we put a value on that information, and the way you can share that and the way you can get it out there, and the people who are more equipped to share that information can manipulate the stories. You know, in terms of the news, I always felt back in the day, and it probably wasn't the case, papers like The Independent, The Eye, I always used to enjoy those because I felt they presented the facts and let you make up your own mind. But now, like you said, if you're watching the BBC, you said before about that website, it's clickbait. And actually, it's presenting more of an opinion than of actual facts. And that's very much how it's gone. The way the information is given to you isn't just, you need to know this. It's given to you in a way that we need you to form this opinion from it.
And also, they I noticed this just today. They steer the anger and the discussion just by choosing which articles they open up comments on. So, for example, Keir Starmer, was it 8 or 9 breaches of the code for not declaring his expenses or his declaring where he'd had gifts and things like that? If that had been Boris Johnson, that would have been straight open for comments. Yeah. It wasn't open for comments for Keir Starmer. And, you know, left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. Somebody's making that decision to not have those 6,000 comments that are going to be basically, he's worse than Boris, and people saying, no, Boris is this, Boris is that. And that just creates this divide, political divide, creates this black and white situation and just fuels it. And they're steering it by choosing whether to open up the comments or not. And the conspiracy theorists would say, well, that's because the BBC have got an agenda, a political agenda, when they shouldn't have.
Ooh.
But that's less of a conspiracy theory and probably a fact.
Yeah, probably. Well, let's move on now. We've done 2 there. I don't really like getting bogged down in those because there's really no way of proving them right or wrong, although we do have our beliefs one way or another. Because I think, you know, anything like that is going to come out in the wash in many, many years' time. So let's go back to one from the 1960s, one where we can actually stick our colours to the mast on this one then, dude. Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landings.
No, he didn't.
You don't believe that? Really?
No.
Really?
Of course he didn't.
There's a number of people who believe this. There's yeah. You know, I think. Well, most people believe we did land on the moon. Let's be clear. The vast majority of people believe we landed on the moon. But there's various anecdotal evidence that says that Kubrick, on his deathbed, admitted to faking the moon landing. the film 2001: A Space Odyssey came about because he was asked to film the moon landings. These are just what I've been told. I'm not saying it's facts. That came about because he asked for access to NASA's files if he did this for them. So there, you don't believe that he did it, then? You believe we landed on the moon, or is everything's tickety boo?
Well, he may have been asked to film it.
Yeah.
But I think there's thousands and thousands of people involved in the moon landing. They would all have to have been in on it to some degree. I mean, Boris Johnson can't even hold a cabinet meeting with 20 people and not get leaks. So how would NASA, with thousands of people, it would there's just no way, because somebody would have spoken out, and once one or two people did, we know how it works. As soon as one or two people start talking, it just cascades, and it would have fallen down very, very quickly.
I agree with you on that one. That said, though, if you break this one down to its bare bones, I do wonder if he was asked to fake a moon landing. I do wonder this, and this is my theory behind it, whether this is where the truth might be muddied by this sort of deathbed confession, which may or may not be true. So there was a lot of pressure on the Americans at the time, a lot of pressure to go to the moon, to advance quicker than Russia. The space race was a very, very real thing back in the 1960s, and started in the 1950s when Yuri Gagarin was the first man in orbit to travel around Earth.
Bending spoons.
In what, sorry? In bending spoons? Yeah, that was a different Yuri, dude. That was a different Yuri. Now, had he done it, no, that would have been a very entertaining thing. Apollo 13 never would have happened. They'd have sorted it all out just with a little bit of cutlery interference. But yeah, so it was really important, not just for America to go to the moon, but just imagine going all that way there and then not being able to send back those pictures and prove categorically this is what they did. So my theory behind it, therefore, is maybe he was asked to do it. Maybe he was asked to recreate before that footage was created, just in case it never happened. Now, that footage may never have seen the light of day, because I do genuinely believe the footage that we've seen genuinely was filmed on the moon, and the other stuff about footprints in the sand, I don't buy any of that. I've seen the science. I followed the science. Listen, I've watched Mythbusters. I've watched the Mythbusters special on it, so it must be true. But I do wonder if Kubrick, maybe he did fake a moon landing.
You could imagine the plan B. We need to prepare a video, and it could have been done from an almost an honest perspective, as you just laid out. What if we get to the moon, we do all of that, we film everything, but the cameras get destroyed, or we don't know what's going to happen to magnetic film when we're on the moon? They could just come back and not be viewable. So when they come back, can you talk to them and recreate it and film the moon landing? And Stanley Kubrick could say, well, yeah, of course I can.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense. And there's not anything particularly wrong with that. If the government may or may not have chosen to say that the videotapes were destroyed, Stanley Kubrick is going to recreate it with all the information from the astronauts that landed on the moon, so that you could see what it was like, and there'd be nothing wrong with that.
No, and I think the danger is why. I sort of thought, well, why didn't they just come out afterwards and say, do you know what, we did this just in case, and but we never had to use it. But then the danger is, it's like, okay, you did that, and that's it can almost add fuel to the fire. And you definitely haven't been, because we know Kubrick's already going around blabbing his mouth off saying that he'd done it.
That's it. You give one bit of information, and it's just a you're opening the tap, aren't you? People will just say, oh, so that. Well, what about this then? What about that? Now, please confirm this. Or why won't you confirm this one? You confirm that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, actually, if we watch the episode that I did on Lego, I built my moon lander. I'll tell you what, it's epic. It even has the bit where the camera falls down, so you can actually see how they could have filmed Neil Armstrong. If Lego couldn't prove it, that's good enough for me. I did
listen. I did listen to that episode. It's the first epised I thought, I really should watch this one. It doesn't really work as well on audio.
Well, the thing is, we had the guy on, and we knew he was big time into his Lego, so we didn't. And obviously, I chatted to him briefly about what we were going to talk about, but I had no idea he was going to get as much Lego out to show us on the day. And he did afterwards as well, even afterwards and before he was showing us different bits of Lego. But yeah, I thought when I listened to it back on the audio, it's like, but the trouble was, if I'd have cut everything a bit, every little bit out, where he was showing his Lego, would have had about 12 minutes to put out a week.
That is true.
It is. Right then. We'll go back onto a modern one. So this is my fourth one, dude. So this is a statistic, and we know how much we love statistics and how accurate and factual they are. 40%, that's quite a big number, yeah? 40% of Americans think that the election was rigged so that Biden won.
40% of Americans think the election was rigged based on a sample of what?
I don't know. I don't know the sample size, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, so there's a large amount of people that don't believe that Biden was electable or was elected. And obviously, I think when we had John on, actually, I don't know if you listened to the episode when we had my cousin Bo on, and John was getting bent out of shape about the numbers as well. And there's, a lot of people, when I listen to all the podcast community that I speak to, not a single one of them believes that Biden got where he is now on the deserving votes that he received. There's a lot of questions about the postal votes, and everybody went to bed thinking that's it, Trump's in. And then the next day, everybody's voting for Biden overnight.
It's very, very interesting watching that from over here. Mm-hmm. Trump is by all accounts, seems a pretty unpleasant person. From the things that he does, which he admits, the things he says, which he admits, makes him unpleasant. So you don't need to say maybe he's not like that really. Just looking at the guy himself says that he's a bit unpleasant, and a lot of his policies probably had some merit, and he went at them very aggressively and did some good things. But overall, as a leader of a country that size in the world, he's probably pretty dangerous, I would suggest. Whether that meant that some higher power than his own government, managed to rig the election in Biden's favor, that's a bit of a stretch, because again, you've got to have a lot of people involved in rigging something that big, and not everybody is a Biden voter. So you've got to have people that are Trump voters that somehow don't know what's going on when they're working, vote counting, postal votes, whatever, next to a Biden voter. It just doesn't seem plausible.
It's interesting that. And obviously, I think one of the things that the question is actually, is it open to fraud in the first place, in terms of, in this country, you show your card at your point of entry, you show them which way you can go and vote, you put your cross by anything that doesn't say Conservative next to it, you fold it over and you pop it in the box and you leave. Whereas over there, literally, it's almost like a post box. You can just stick your vote in it, and postal votes obviously sent out to you. Obviously, there's got to be a degree of anonymity about it, so there's no name on it. There's no way of proving it's you. You can literally just walk up to the post box and shove it through in some cases. So you can sort of see that system is open to fraud. And there's also a school of thought that actually said that Trump was that unpopular, they didn't want him in the first time around, when it was him versus Hillary. The school of thought was that Hillary was the safer pair of hands, although she can't be trusted with emails, clearly. Obviously, well, no, actually, no, I'm not going to slander myself. I'll just leave that there. But there was a school of thought that people underestimated just how popular Trump was going to be. And actually, there was an attempt to rig that election as well, but it just wasn't successful.
That's because the Russians were better at rigging.
I guess they did a solid job with Brexit.
So again, it's very difficult. I mean, you're talking huge numbers of people, and it's clearly open to fraud. The mechanism says, but in this country, you don't have to show anything. You just walk in, say your name, and they tick you off. You don't have to take your voter card with you. You just walk in. And as you say, you go in and tick Conservative and ignore all the others, and off you go.
That's not what I said. That's definitely not what I said.
So that one's harder to have an actual opinion on, because I don't live in that country, and you only get the media's view, or the people that are on the podcasts, and people that have their own podcasts. Generally, there's maybe a stereotype, but generally have quite strong opinions about things.
Yeah, you might be right there.
So they may be pre-prejudiced to one way or another. It might be a disservice to people, but the people I hear on your podcast that are having a go at Biden or Trump, they do seem pretty strong and not open to conversation. I spoke to my brother about it. He's been over there for 20 years nearly now, and he didn't really think one way or the other. He didn't, Trump's an idiot, Biden's old and an idiot. But in terms of fraud, it's just very, very difficult to imagine how that could happen on such a scale.
I think the thing is, again, like with all conspiracy theories, there's that element in truth that you could see why they wouldn't want Trump to have a second term. Because like you say, he was quite dangerous. He was a very divisive individual. And yes, I'm sure he did put in some fantastic policies that definitely the economy of the States seemed to be booming while he was in charge. And he's a man who does understand the good contract and how to stack it in his own favour. We've seen that throughout his career. Don't get me wrong, he's had some howls as well. There's a few men that have been bankrupt quite as many times as he has. But you could see why they wouldn't want that guy in charge for a second term. And I always thought that, certainly Biden was put up against him because he was seen as a safe pair of hands. And actually, listen to some of the stuff the guy's come out with since, that has proven probably not to be the case. And I actually thought by now that he would have stepped down through health reasons, and Kamala Harris would have been left in charge. But that's not proved to be the case.
Didn't one of your guests not have a great opinion of her either?
We've had none of them have, to be honest with you. No one's got a great deal. I'll be honest, I don't know much about Kamala Harris, but I guess it would be like them, not in the States, not really understanding what a twat Rishi Sunak is.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just an expression, not an opinion, except that it is my opinion as well. So here's another one then. Here's another cheery one. Let's move on for one. Death. Yeah. So here's a conspiracy theory. And this is about the soul. This is the proof of the existence of the human soul. You going to get on board with this one?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So when you die, when you or I pass from this realm, we will drop 21 grams. And this is believed to be evidence that is the soul leaving the body.
Drop as in lose weight?
We will weigh 21 grams less after the point of death.
Immediately after?
Yeah, so obviously one of the things we know, and let's not get too grim about this, but we know when we pass away, the muscles relax and release everything that is inside of our body, which is a troubling image. You've seen how much food I've eaten this afternoon. But that's a fact, it does. But we factor that in as well, because these are people who just passed, they're weighed, and so that is still there. It's still on the scales. I'm trying to paint a very pleasant picture. It's not easy to do. But you still will weigh 21 grams less. And the theory is that is the soul leaving the human body. And this is a chap who put this forward, and he has measured and weighed people on their deathbed as they pass away. And 21 grams does leave the human body at the point of death.
And that's been a scientific experiment is repeated with independent witnesses.
It is.
Controlled environment.
It is. It's not a huge sample size, I'll be honest with you. I've heard this story many, many times before. And when I dug into it a little bit, I was quite surprised by the sample size, to be honest with you. 9 people.
9 people. Okay. Well, is it consistently 21 grams?
Consistently. Well, it was an average of 21 grams,
Okay. Because air obviously weighs something. 21 grams isn't a lot. The body probably is carrying quite a lot of air, oxygen, and other gases at any one point at a time. When you die, you will expel those, no doubt, particularly what's in the lungs. So you're going to weigh less, and you can physically look on the slab, the tray, wherever it is you're lying, and think, well, everything that's there is still there, apart from the air. That would seem a pretty sensible explanation.
It would, but then It didn't end there, though, Dave. It didn't end there, because this isn't where his experiments end. Personally, I think we need to be taking a little bit of a closer look at this fella, because he then performed the same experiments on 15 dogs that were at death's door. Why do you get 15 dogs that are dying from? I'll be highly suspicious of this individual. But he performed the same experiment on dogs, weighing them. And what grams would you then expect for a dog? Obviously, dogs can vary in size from very small to much larger. What weight would you expect?
If you follow my theory that was explaining it, you'd probably go 8 or 9 grams.
You would, but do you know what it was?
21 grams.
No, it was 0.
0.
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean, dogs have got souls the same as humans, so that just fails it, doesn't it?
Well, does it though? Because I think the thing is with dogs. Now, let's just assume that God created us in our image, and you follow the Bible. These animals they're basically here for us to eat and do what we will with. Yeah. No jokes about me being a Welshman and sheep, please. So they're there. They are lesser souls. I'm not saying this. I love dogs. You know me. I am a dog lover. But people will project a personality onto a dog that really isn't there. Do you know what I mean? It's one of the most disappointing things, actually, when you have a dog and you believe it's fairly unique. And don't at me on this one, because I don't want to get a lot of hate over this. I do love dogs, but with the various breeds, the personalities are more or less the same. Actually, when you break it down, I'm afraid that you generally behave in a very, very similar pattern. So we project a personality. We give them a name, often a very human name, like Dave or Steve. And Dave's a great name for a cat. It's a good name for a dog as well. But we give them a name, and we project onto them. So maybe the feeling that a dog would have a soul comes from us loving it almost like we'd love a child, like a fur baby, as it were. But not necessarily that these creatures are, well, they're sentient in their degree, but are they, do they have a soul? Did the good Lord take them up there? Although I suppose he did actually send Noah to save a few of the buggers, so it does make you wonder.
Yeah, look, I mean, that sounds like the sort of experiment that, if it had any merit whatsoever, could be quite easily reproduced and proved. And there'd be too many people in the world that would be interested in that to all not want to do it, because they wouldn't want people to know that we actually had a soul that you could measure. So it would have been something that would have been demonstrably would have been proved, I think, beyond doubt, one way or another. Do we have a soul or not? Man, that's a different question, isn't it?
Do you believe we do?
No. I think we are. Well, we are. We're born, we make the best of it, we die.
Interesting.
Do you believe we got a soul?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like I say, we had Richard Pollard on the other day, and I think you were there in that lecture theatre the same day that he delivered his speech, weren't you?
Oh, I can't remember.
I'm sure you were. Me, you, and Gaz. I can remember. We were really surprised to see Dougie Barnett there, the science teacher. We had a chat with him afterwards, and he had sort of said that he believed that we were too different. We were too different from anything else on this planet, and that we had to be put here by some creature. Now, or some god, I should say, some creature. Sorry, God. But my general believing is if we were, and there's no way that we could have any knowledge of this. This is my issue with religion. We couldn't know what that God was. We couldn't be, we may have been made in his image, but that information wouldn't be there when he sent his son. I don't know. I'm all very, very skeptical of that. Do we have a soul? I don't know. I'd like to think we do. I would like to think that we do have a soul. But my fear is that literally we are just a freak accident, that the conditions were perfect for human life to develop in the way that it has developed, and that we're going to live our lives with this feeling of self-importance, that we're there in God's image to go forth and do something special with our lives, when actually we were just an accident. We're in the best of the circumstances that we're dealt with. We deal with the nonsense that's banded down to us by the group of people that we frigging voted for to do what should be our bidding and in our best interest. And guess what? They've done what everybody does. You put them in a position to think, fucking hell, I'm going to look after them myself, because that's what everybody does when they see a set of circumstances where it could be beneficial to them. They take advantage of it. And I just think that's the case, that we will then, we'll lay down on our deathbed try and say something that's inspirational to our loved ones rather than like, what, just another beer, please, before I go, and then that's it, we're gone. And then you expect to wake up somewhere special, and then you don't. And it's just an immensity of blackness that we will never comprehend because we're ceasing to exist in a way that is meaningful. Sleep easy tonight, folks.
I think that was the long version of we're born, we make the best of it, we die.
That's it. Well, Gaz isn't here, so someone's going to add some words to this podcast.
It'd be great to think there was something after.
It would be. And if you want to get, and like you say about religion, it's about getting people to behave in a certain way in some ways, and in its basis form. And by selling them that thing, if you do this and you're really good in this life, then you're going to get your rewards in the next. It's a great way, with certain individuals to get them to behave in a certain way. I'm not saying that is the case. Listen, I may be way wrong on that. I'm far more open to the idea that I am than probably I'd care to admit. I just fear, like yourself, that there is nothing more out there. But let's move on, because we've only got 2 left to go through. So number 6, chemtrails. This is an old school one. Are you familiar with chemtrails?
No.
So you've seen the airplanes go over on a cloudless day, and they leave behind either a contrail or a chemtrail, depending on what you believe. Okay, so a contrail obviously would be vapor that is freezing in a certain set of weather circumstances. I had to look that up, to be honest with you. I don't understand why they were there. But there are those that believe that the government is getting these planes when they fly over to drop out chemicals that are either damaging to the land for old Billy Boy to be buying up his farms, or controlling the weather. Why are you laughing?
Okay, so this isn't in the fuel. This is loaded onto the planes in a separate way.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not important on the weight of those things. They don't measure exactly everything that goes on there. I'll stick some more chemicals up there. This will be a pisser.
And they're also not refueled with everyone sitting watching their plane be refueled. But okay, that's complete nonsense, isn't it? In every possible way.
It don't make any sense to me. I don't see what the benefits is. And if they were going to try and control the weather, they're doing a pretty shitty job of it, as far as I can tell. Because this weather sucks, and global warming wouldn't be a thing, would it, if they were controlling the weather?
No, unless they're controlling it to cause global warming as part of the big reset.
Oh, Dave, you've just started a new branch of physics, or conspiracy physics.
But in all seriousness, if you can say that in this context of this particular conspiracy theory, if they wanted to put chemicals in the air, there's probably a much easier and cost-effective way than spreading it on millions of flights every year.
Like them big cooling towers that they used to use.
Yeah, exactly.
That pumps stuff out all the time. I know this one though, Dave. Actually, when you look into it, this is a very, very popular conspiracy theory, and there's a number of people that do buy into it.
When you were looking into these conspiracy theories, you probably wouldn't have got a sense of this, but I wonder if the sort of people that believe this particular conspiracy theory also believe all the others.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. I hear. Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from with that, and I do think if you're going to buy into something which is this one, which sounds to me utterly ridiculous, that if you're going to buy into that, then you're going to buy into all the rest as well. And this is the other thing now, and I'm choosing my words carefully now, because a lot of these things that we've talked about tonight, there are listeners to the show. There are people I know that do believe these sort of things, and we're not poo-pooing you. We're not saying that you're all nut jobs or anything for believing those things. We're not. We're just looking at the different things which are outside of what is generally believed that is termed a conspiracy theory. And again, it has become a derogatory term, hasn't it? And if you are buying into all those things, then you are a conspiracy theorist. If you're picking out one of those things, and if you're listening to the bit that we did at the start about the Great Reset and think, actually, no, that isn't a conspiracy theory, because there is a chain of events which you can sort of see unfolding, and you might be able to predict which way it's going to go. And listen, I'm a huge fan of Russell Brand. I watch a lot of his videos on YouTube, and he does talk a lot about the Great Reset. I still don't 100% understand what he's going on about when he talks about it, but I do enjoy his videos, because the stuff he shares isn't necessarily mainstream information, but at the same time, it isn't necessarily conspiracy theory either. It's just quite a balanced opinion on the way that the world is sort of panning out. But I get what you're saying. The people who buy into this probably believe that Elvis lived on past the 70s, or that Adolf Hitler moved to Argentina.
It would be, it'd be interesting to see if there are any studies out there, because I think it would label conspiracy theorists of a certain type of people.
Mm.
Contrary to what you just said, in other words, if you just believe one or two of those, and as we said at the start, you could believe things. It doesn't mean that you're somehow deluded. It's just that's how it's been explained to you. You believe the people that have explained it to you over other people. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily gullible or stupid. It just means that you believe one particular set of information over another. But if you happen to believe 6 out of 6 conspiracy theories you've laid out today, I would start to worry about your sanity.
Indeed. Well, let's see it. Let's see if we can go for 7 for 7. Yeah. We hit the 7-minute stretch. Avril Lavigne. You familiar with Avril Lavigne?
She the singer.
Jesus Christ. Kim said, you need to mention this one. You need to mention this one. I said, Kim, it's Dave. You won't know who Avril Lavigne is. he's not up on popular culture the last 20 years. Probably longer. She's a singer, songs like Skater Boy and stuff like that. Now, if Andy was on, we just got his attention because he's a big Avril Lavigne fan. I'm not necessarily talking about the music either. So after she released her album Let Go, the rumor is that she died and was replaced by her body double, Melissa Vandella. And there are people point to various things like photographs of her where she looks slightly different, and another photo shoot where she had the word Melissa written on her hand, and it was like almost hinting that this was what was going on. Have you ever heard this story before?
No, because I barely know who she is. I couldn't picture it. I couldn't tell you any of her songs. The name. Probably Alice has mentioned the name. So she's died.
Yeah.
And presumably the conspiracy theory is she's got a record company and a family that want loads of money.
Yeah.
So they got a double in to keep earning the money off the back of her name.
Yeah, because she was hugely, hugely popular. And this stems from a blog where someone had pieced together an awful lot of information. And that blog was entitled, it was written in Spanish, and it was Avril está muerta. And I apologize for my Spanish there. But it is literally Avril is dead. And it listed all this fantastic information which pointed towards it. And this blog, this information has traveled all around the world. It's been used as a conspiracy theory to say that she has passed away. I've seen it on mainstream websites. I've seen it in mainstream newspapers where they talked about it. But the key thing is, at the bottom of this blog, it states that none of this is true. It states that this is how easy it is to start a conspiracy theory by sharing facts which have got very little basis in truth. And let's just see where it goes. And it's stated at the bottom of the blog, and yet it still went all the way around the world, despite the fact it said this isn't true.
And it's easy to do, because I have no idea what that list of things is, but it's probably got things like, on average, she tweeted 6 times every day, but on this day and this day, she didn't tweet at all. She's seen going to this restaurant once every fortnight. She wasn't there yesterday. You can just imagine things like that, and people go, ooh, yeah, look at all those different things. Must be true.
Indeed. So those are the 7 that I want to talk about. But the key thing for me is, dude, how do you spot conspiracy theory? How do you spot conspiracy theory from a breaking story that people want to hide?
That's difficult, isn't it? That is very difficult, because even that Avril Latrine.
Latrine's something very different, and latrine is something very different. Avril Lavigne.
Even that one, the first time you hear that, when you've got no background, no knowledge, and it's put to you on a media source online, whether that be a blog or whatever, you'd hear it and you'd think, okay, I mean, that sounds, it could happen. Because it could happen. It's not. Oh, a T-Rex was seen stomping through London yesterday. Clearly isn't going to happen, but that could happen. So immediately you can't dismiss it off the bat. And once that doubt is in your head, I guess it very quickly goes one way or another based on what would you like it to be. Would you like Bill Gates to be a mass murderer? Yeah, he's very rich. I don't like him. No, he's a great philanthropist. So very quickly you'd fall one side or the other, and then you start to search out support for your side the fence. And as soon as you go down that tunnel, like we were saying earlier, you then find yourself in an echo chamber because you find yourself following people on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook that have also gone down that side of the fence. And the more you go down that rabbit hole, the more you become surrounded by the noise, and the more people then start to say, oh yeah, and also, and yeah, absolutely, I totally agree. And before long, you're totally convinced yourself that something is the case.
That's interesting. I think you're onto something. But I do, like you said, now, one thing that I haven't researched for this episode, maybe we'll do one for one in the future, is the ones that have been proven true afterwards. I started looking at them, but to be honest, I'd never heard of any of them anyway. So I thought it was little point in sharing them, because it's all well and good saying, well, this is a conspiracy theory that proved true. It's not for me. Was it conspiracy theory? Because I've never bloody heard of it. It could just be the facts. I don't know. And, when you look at things like the Watergate scandal, stuff like that, and then things like Princess Diana, and I'm choosing words very carefully because we're talking about the death of somebody who was very much beloved. But the accusation is that people are, the Al Fayed family and the royal family have all been implicated one way or another in what was, in all likelihood, a very tragic traffic accident. And this is the other thing where it's very difficult to accept that someone as high profile as her, as beloved as she was by many, and I do mean many. I'm not a fan of the royal family, so I'm not going to go down that route because I'm not going to be disrespectful to someone who lost their life in the way that she did. But it's very difficult to accept that she lost her life in such a simple way as a car accident. And I don't mean that flippantly in terms of the other people who have, because it is a tragic event that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But for someone as high profile as her to lose her life in a way, surely it would be, it's easier to believe that she was wiped out intentionally than it could be just a careless accident of the paparazzi or whoever clipping her as she was going into a tunnel trying to get away from that situation. And that's sorry, go on.
That kind of addresses both the central points that we're looking at this, I think. And one is somebody setting out to very quickly steer the agenda, steer the outcome and the dialogue of what's going on. In that case, if it was something to do with the royal family or his family, and it was something purposely done, they very quickly want to get out there as the paparazzi. Then you come to the other side of the coin when you're the person trying to decide on the fence. When you first hear the story and you think, well, which side of the fence I'm going to go on, you pick your side, paparazzi, royal family ordered the killing, and you then follow your nose and you keep going down that rabbit hole, getting people with the like-minded thing. So both of those points is the agenda being set to call it a conspiracy theory, to distract away from the truth, and then how people get sucked in one way or another. You're right, and it's very, very difficult to know, because Princess Diana is probably one of the best cases of that, because it was so bad and it was so pushed out there that this could have been the royal family themselves that did it, because he wasn't an appropriate person to be marrying the ex-wife of the Prince of Wales. And people would jump on that very quickly, and you could see why therefore they would need to change the story very quickly and call it a conspiracy theory and get that label attached to it.
Yeah, and that it's very true, actually. So I think there's two aspects to it. There is the bit that's easier to believe that this wasn't the case, And the other thing that we spoke about at the start, the taking back of control, there's a number of factors there, and obviously those are all open to manipulation. And then obviously when you follow like-minded people, and I guess that's a lesson from this, is to be open-minded, isn't it? Yes, be open-minded to the idea of conspiracy theories, but also be open-minded to the mainstream story is also potentially the most accurate one. But take a balanced opinion of both. Don't just follow those people on Twitter who are like-minded to yourself. Follow everybody else who's going to challenge your ideals and make you think differently. And I think that's important.
It is, but it's also incredibly difficult. We tell our kids that you can't really believe anything unless you've witnessed it yourself or you've seen evidence that you are absolutely confident can't be manipulated in any way, or it's something that I tell them. So essentially, it's very, very hard because your advice is great, but if you're sitting this side of a computer screen and you're saying the advice is don't listen to those people on Twitter, also look at what those people on Twitter are saying, because they might not be telling you the truth and they're saying opposite things, it doesn't really get you anywhere, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And let's just chuck something back out there as well. That you made an interesting comment there about a T-Rex being in London, yeah? So which is more likely? A T-Rex being in London or a T-Rex stood next to a Stegosaurus?
The Stegosaurus, is that one of the bigger ones?
It's one of those ones with the spines on its back. You must have had one of those kids, as a kid, as a toy, one of those plastic dinosaurs. So it's got like plates on the back. Brontosaurus is the one with the big long neck. Could well be Nessie.
Right. Okay. Well, presumably the Stegosaurus would eat the T-Rex, or vice versa.
No, let's just say they are there. The T-Rex is chasing after the Stegosaurus. He's going to eat it.
Right.
Or a T-Rex is wandering around London.
Well, probably the former.
Well, here's the thing. This is where this is probably on for another episode, really. But with you mentioning it, I read something online that, again, so it must be factual. So a T-Rex being pictured in London, in modern day London, is far more accurate than the idea of a T-Rex chasing after a Stegosaurus, because they existed so many millions of years apart that actually modern day London is closer to the existence of the T-Rex than the Stegosaurus is to the existence of the T-Rex. And that is a mind-blowing fact when you think about the amount of time that we've been on this planet.
It is, yeah. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Categoric proof that we were brought here by our Lord.
I don't think so.
And on that bombshell. So first, what I'm going to do is give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Ollie's, as well. So if you haven't distanced themselves from this podcast after this episode, you can go to ollies-ollies.com and get 20% off your order by using the promo code Tallboy Radio, all capitals, all one word. And that is available only in the UK, I'm afraid, because they only ship to the UK. It's not just our promo code. It is just that they are only in the UK. So please head over there if you want to try their pretzels, their chocolate-covered pretzels. That's easy for me to say after 3 beers. And their olives and their nut mixes, which I can tell you are all fantastic, having tried them all myself. So that brings us to the end of this episode, which is, interestingly enough, the 1-year anniversary since we changed the format back from being a beer podcast, which obviously you did one of those. You did your Devil's Advocate episode on there, didn't you? Where you put us on the spot with a few questions that you had to ask.
Yeah, it's a while ago, that, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Thanks for that.
So yeah, cheers for joining us, Dave. I've enjoyed this episode. We're actually going to have a little bit of a summer break now. We've got a couple of weeks off recording. I think the next episode we're going to sit down and record. I was chatting to the Scottish alchemists today. I went to a gin tasting evening last night in Alcumclove Farm on its way to Congleton. There's a gin company there, gin distillery based there called The Edge, originally based in Alderley Edge, and we tried some of their gins. I was chatting to them, and hopefully we're going to get them on the podcast. If not, we're going to get their gin over to the Scottish Alchemist, and they're going to try it and have a little bit of a chat about that. So that will be the next episode of Tallboy Radio. You'll hear it'll all sound fresh, and Gaz will be back from his travels. Andy may or may not be with us. We don't know at this stage, but that's what we have planned. So, Dave, do you want to say your goodbyes and leave us with any final thoughts?
Yeah, I've enjoyed talking about conspiracy theories. It's a difficult one, and it's difficult because the source of your evidence to substantiate one way or another is the source of the problem. So take an open mind and don't fall too strong one side or the other.
There you go. Good advice, that dude. Good advice. But I'm going to leave you some words. It's been a while since I've done this, but I'm going to quote Morris here as I close out this episode. So, teach your kids to recognize and despise all the propaganda filtered down by the dead echelons mainstream media. Good night and take care.